Most people play it safe, and that's exactly why they get stuck. But what if I told you that risk isn't just necessary, it's biblical? And if you're sitting on an idea, waiting for the perfect time, this is your wake up call. Today, we're breaking down the unfiltered truth about risk and reward. And trust me, if you don't take risks, you're risking more than you think.
Got it. Oh, Bill, taking risks. And you said it's even biblical. It is actually, it's so interesting. So why is this topic actually really important? So I think there's a couple of things that we really need to consider as we dig into this. One is that the fear of failure stops most people from ever really even starting. So that has to be kind of first and foremost as we're thinking about this topic. And then kind of the biggest barrier to success isn't necessarily a lack of skill. It's a lack of courage, meaning like people are afraid to even start. But they tell themselves, well, I'm not qualified, I don't have the right skills, I don't have the right knowledge, whatever that is. But that's not really it. That's just an excuse. And we talked about that in a previous podcast session. So, and then there's many believers, they hesitate, right? They think that, oh, I need to just kind of wait for this sign from God. But what if faith really means that stepping out before you actually start seeing the results? So we're going to dig into that a little bit, and Jesus called people to radical action. Faith isn't a passive thing, and it's like really, really active. So we got to like when we think we hear, we got to go and do something. So the question is, have you ever hesitated on a big decision because you were afraid that you might fail? If you've ever done that, go drop a 100 in our comment section, and we'll see what we find out there.
So, Jamie, let me take us to Matthew chapter 25. I'm not going to read the passage, but this is the story of the parable of the talents, where the master gives,
Yep.
he's going away for a long period of time, and he gives 3 servants 5, 2, and 1, 10, 5, and 1. He gives 3 of them 3 different amounts of money. And the first guy goes out and he puts his stuff to work and he doubles it. And the second guy goes out and he puts his stuff to work and he doubles it. And the third guy said, I don't know. I don't want to risk it. I could lose. If I invest this the wrong way, I could lose it. So he buries it. He buries the thing. And he's the one that gets chastised and literally kicked out and rebuked because he played it safe. He didn't trust himself, and he didn't trust his master, and he didn't trust his other 2 servants who were examples to him. And they just kind of like, here's what we did, but you buried yours. And he was the one that got kicked out because he was just hoping, well, I'm just going to hang around and my master's going to take care of me because I'm just going to give back what he gave me with no return whatsoever. So the key lesson here is real simple. God isn't calling us to not fail. That's what he was doing when he was burying that stuff. He was not failing. God doesn't call us to not fail. He's calling us to multiply what he gives us. He's trusting you. He's giving you talents. Use your talents. He's giving you abilities. Use your abilities. God has given you gifts. Hiding them isn't humility. It's disobedience.
Wow. That's crazy, Bill. And I never thought about it in the terms of God doesn't call us to not fail. I mean, we don't want to fail. That's an us thing, right? Like we're afraid to fail, we might be humiliated. What will people think? And then we tell ourselves that we're not we're not good enough, right? But that's not what God's calling us to do. He's calling us just like to take what He's already given us and do something with it. There's some real world examples, and I don't know if if this one has any biblical side to it because I don't know where Bezos' belief system is. But you think about Jeff Bezos and Amazon, right? You think like this was a guy that had a really, really good job on Wall Street. And you think most Wall Street people, tend to do pretty well, at least financially. And he gave that up and he started an online bookstore. Like, who thinks about online bookstore? Like right now, that's like commonplace, but back then, like that was a bizarre out there idea, and he did it in his garage. You've seen the pictures of Bezos sitting in his little desk, and he's just got this little, almost a handwritten poster up on the wall that says Amazon. You hear about people starting businesses in their garages. I mean, Bezos is the one that did that, and the risk, phew, that's huge risk, right? But the reward that was there, and then he built basically one of the largest companies in history, and the biggest. So, like, he could have failed like gigantically with that, but he believed in himself. He sat down. He put in the work, and you look at what it has. So sometimes the biggest regret that people have is not taking the risk. Because again, I think what would Bezos, if he had never done that, there would be no Amazon right now. And if he was still on Wall Street, what do you think he's thinking to himself? He's thinking to himself like, man, I still wish I would have done that thing. I still wish I would have done that thing. I still wish I would have done that thing. And to be kicking himself because his regret is he never took the action. But fortunately for Bezos and for all of us, I guess, to a certain degree, he didn't do that, right? And then he also got the biblical example that too. Think about Peter walking on water, right? In Matthew, Peter steps out on the water and he's good. But then what happens as soon as he starts to like doubt, wondering like, hey, this isn't possible. People can't walk on water. And as soon as he starts to realize like the reality of it, what happens? He starts sinking. Unfortunately, Jesus was there pulling back up and all was good. But the lesson there is like you're never going to be able to walk on water. You're never going to be able to do the big things if we don't step out of the boat. Like you got to take that risk, and risk comes with some fear. But staying in the boat means that you're never going to experience the results that you're looking for. And I love you thinking of it with Peter. If you don't step out of the boat, you'll never experience the miracles.
I love the idea of Bezos. If he stayed in Wall Street, he probably
He
would have
stayed in the boat.
he probably would have become a very successful nobody.
Hmm. Yeah.
We never would have heard of him.
Nope. Never know his name.
Never know his name. Never would have made an impact that he's made. Arguably good or bad, that's entirely up to you. But he never would
Yeah.
have done that.
You got to decide that on your own.
And yeah, so we're looking at just a few key ideas about this. Playing it safe. First of all, playing it safe is the biggest risk of all. Inaction is the greatest enemy of purpose. The servant who buries his talents wasn't protected; he was punished. He was punished. The master didn't come back, put his hand on his shoulder, and says, "That's okay. We okay." No, he was chastised. He was rebuked. He was punished for inaction. And in our faith today, we got to not only trust God, we have to trust God when we step forward, when we step out. So playing it safe, that's the biggest risk of all.
Hmm. And I think we have to keep in mind that faith requires action. Like sometimes it's nice to think that I have faith and I'm just going to sit because I believe. But faith really requires actions. And in Hebrews, I mean, faith is the substance of all things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen, right? So you can't wait to feel ready. You got to move, and then the faith follows. And isn't that so true? Like once you start taking some action, doing something, actually, putting in the work, all of a sudden you start to see some small results, and it starts to like you start to like this is possible, and then the faith actually starts to grow. Like you got to have some of the faith up front to like okay, I believe I can do it, and then do it. But the faith begins to build and grow the more you actually do, because you start to see, hey, it is possible, and this is working, and it is coming through. So you know gotta do the work first, and then faith starts to follow.
Absolutely. And the greatest reward comes from taking the right risks. Now,
Mm.
you don't want to take the wrong risk, but how do you know it's a wrong risk unless you step out and do it? I believe that God blesses bold faith, whether it's in business or in a relationship or in life or in moving across the country, whatever it is you're going to do. It requires taking a bold step. It is bold faith. Faith isn't passive. So, what's one risk? Talking to the audience at this point, what's one risk you've been avoiding? You're avoiding it. You don't want to do it. Drop it in the comments. Make it public. Never know who's going to read it and start praying for you. So, look, Look, I get it. Taking risks is scary, but let me ask you, what's scarier, staying stuck? Watching someone else step into the opportunity you hesitated on? Seeing your God given potential go unused? The parable of the talents makes one thing clear: God rewards faith in action, not fear in hiding. So if
Yeah.
you're waiting for a perfect time, this is it. Step out, start the business, launch the channel, whatever it is you're going to do, write the book, take the risk, because the greatest regret in life is the risk you never took.
That's so good, Bill. The greatest regret in life is the risk you never took. That's like, and that kind of hits home sometimes. And I don't know, it hurts to hear it, but sometimes it's the things that you need to hear. So here's what I'm taking away from what we've talked about today. Number one, risk is actually biblical. Playing it safe isn't in God's plan. Like He wants us to go take action. And faith isn't a noun as much as it is a verb. Like it requires action. So action fuels that belief, and it's not the other way around, right? So faith is a verb, and then our gifts weren't meant to be buried like the talents. Like we need to use them, and if we don't use them, they will go away. We'll lose them. So risk is biblical, faith is a verb, and gifts aren't meant to be buried. I think those kind of become the big takeaways today. So kind of wrapping this up a little bit. So let's move beyond just like talking about this, Bill. Let's actually give our listeners something they can apply to their life starting right away. So why don't you start us off with that?
All right. What's your next best step? We've heard this so many times. Well, what's your next best step? Well, ask yourself, what's that thing you've been hesitating on? What's the thing you've been praying about, but you haven't made steps toward it? It's like, you've been praying for a husband or you've been praying for a wife, but you never put yourself out there to meet other people. Come on. Is this hesitation based on wisdom, or is it just fear of failure? Or maybe even fear of success? What would happen if you took action today? So identify your next best step, write it down.
Okay, so we write it down. That helps to eliminate the fear a little bit. And I think then the next part that we want to do is then take that step and but to do it boldly. Like just like remember, my faith is going to grow once I start to take the steps. So this week, take one, it can be a small step, but have the boldness to take the step towards whatever that thing is that you just wrote down in that step one and whatever that goal is. And then when you do that, um, like just think about like send the email or write the email with a plan to send it, post the video, launch the idea. I mean, that's something that Bill, I mean, we're still struggling with it a little bit this podcast. That's kind of where we've been talking about this for a very, very long time. And we finally just said, do it. And we
It's true.
know that we're going to get better as we go, but we're now doing it. So launch that idea, do whatever it is, and remember that faith doesn't wait for certainty. It moves before the results are always visible sometimes.
And the key to that is take the step boldly. Don't be timid. Did
Hmm.
did Peter check the temperature of the water before he stepped out of the boat? I'm thinking no. I think he knew it was already cold, but
Tip his toes in.
tip his toes in. Third thing is just face the fear and reframe failure. A lot of us don't step up because we're just afraid of failing. Inaction is not failing. Okay, but failure is the enemy. Failure isn't the enemy. Inaction is. So reframe your thinking. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" Go with, "Well, what if I grow?"
Hmm. That's a really good way to look at that is not what if I fail, but what happens if I get better? What if I grow? What if I learn something? So I love that. So the biggest risk isn't failing. I think we've clearly um, decided that. The biggest risk is never trying. So don't just think about this. Do something about it today. Step out, take some action, and just watch and see what God does, how He moves and moves in your life.
Exactly. Thanks, Jamie. So listen, we'd love your feedback. So leave a comment.
Mhm.
If you got a topic idea for a future podcast, that'd be great. Let us know in the comments. If you've
Yeah,
got a problem you think we could solve, we love a challenge. We are
we do.
challenge loving type guys. So don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications. That's Jamie. That's Jamie French.
And that right there would be Bill McConnell.